Yes, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com for another edition of the UNC Football Show. I'm Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does. You probably don't really need an introduction at this point, AJ. It's our very unpublished Andrew Jones.
I need
People
an
know who you are.
I need an introduction. I need to be reminded of who I am. Sometimes I want to forget.
Yeah, I think people probably know if they're even just somewhat regular listeners to this show. I think they probably know who the heck you are by now. But AJ, Carolina football, I know it's a bye week. We didn't do it on the last bye week, but we said, you know what, let's come on here and talk a little Carolina football, some topics we're going to hit on. Going to be a relatively short show. At least I'm saying that right now. When we're still talking 55 minutes later, you know, that's just part of the course here.
That's AJ's
football show. So yeah, man. So we'll attempt to keep this one a little bit shorter. I don't think we need to go an hour talking Carolina football during the bye week, but if we do, you know, don't be surprised. But AJ, I want to, obviously Carolina coming off 2 straight wins, 2 road wins, another, you know, impressive performance against Florida State. I know Florida State is a train wreck to say the least right now, but I thought the way in which Carolina went about winning that game, kind of similar to the way they went about beating Virginia, you can take some positives away. And I think Carolina fans should be optimistic. I don't think a lot of them are or really care about Carolina winning right now. I'm not going to say a lot of them. I think there is a section of the fan base that I think is made up its mind and doesn't really care what happens the rest of the season. Just go look at some of our numbers. We were talking about off camera. It's like when Carolina loses a game, we get more views than when Carolina wins a game right now, which is a kind of an interesting thing that we can dive into a little bit. But I think there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic going into the final sprint of the season against Wake, BC, and State. And I think Carolina's got a legitimate chance to win 8 games this year in the regular season, but we'll have to see how it plays out. But AJ, just is the vibe around, I think it feels like the vibe around the program, I'm not talking about from a fan perspective, but inside the KFC, it feels like Carolina's in a really, really good spot right now. Mm-hmm. And it feels like it's in a spot that after the JMU game, I didn't know if it was possible for this program to get maybe back to where it's feeling right now, you know, X amount of weeks ago after that debacle in Kenan Stadium. But I mean, they've done it, and I think they deserve some credit for it. Yeah,
I think they've cut the cord to that game.
Yeah.
And they've had a lot of things happen since then that have helped them cut the cord. And you cannot escape the effect of Tylee Craft at all this season, and it will carry until they go into spring practice next year.
Yeah.
So what that did is, and I've said this before and I'll reiterate again, is that gave these kids a lot of healthy perspective. They carried the weight of the JMU game. And I thought the staff did a great job having them ready to play at Duke the next week. They're up 20-0 midway through the third, but then boom.
Fell off, yeah.
Yeah, they did what Carolina does too often. And then they did enough with Pitt, tied fourth quarter, but they lose. Pitt scores the last 10 points. They tie Georgia Tech inside the final minute, and then the 68-yard run. So the staff had them ready. Mack has never lost this team. A lot of people thought he did, but he hasn't lost his team. So when you start checking boxes about, you know, should he go, should he stay kind of stuff, which I know a lot of people are doing. So we're not going to ignore that here on the show or THI at all. You know, the should he stay box, so that's one. He hadn't lost a team. You have a 70-50 debacle like that. A lot of, especially on the heels of 2 straight collapses, a lot of coaches start losing their team. It didn't happen with this group. But they'd already dealt with adversity before the JMU game with Randy Clements and his illness, and I cannot impress upon people how enough that it was extremely serious. And then the Max Johnson stuff, very, very serious situation with him. Took him 2 weeks before he could return from Minnesota. That tells you how serious it was. And then you're dealing with a third-string quarterback who showed up 20 pounds overweight and was told he wasn't going to play. And then they got 70-50 and looking around saying, we don't have a quarterback. We just gave up 70 to a team that a week earlier scored 13 against Gardner-Webb.
Yeah.
What are we doing here? This thing is just burn it down and build it back up again. I get that. But here they are at 5-4. They played inferior opponents the last 2 weeks, but they did what good teams are supposed to do to inferior opponents. They took the breath out of them on special teams, on defense, and on offense. They beat them in all 3 phases very thoroughly, and they won going away, and they won on the road. This team's 3-1 on the road. The one loss is by a point at Duke, a game they were led by 20-0. And if you look at the defensive numbers, I ran a piece that was free. I ran it election day. So that had all the numbers of the defensively on the road versus at home. The 3-1 on the road, all power conference games, because they had Minnesota. They're giving up 280 yards a game on the road. They're giving up like 16 points a game, whatever it is, on the road. They've been very their sacks. 25 of their 32 sacks as a team have come on the road.
Yeah,
and they played one more home game. Played 5 home games, 4 road games. That's a pretty good sign. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people say. I covered the JMU game. I sat there in the press box, and I thought to myself, well, this is about as disgusting as it gets. And this is the kind of thing that gets a coach fired. You and I talked about that. This gets you fired. But you know what? Closing the season really strong with a third-string quarterback after everything they've been through is the kind of thing that gets a coach retained. So the fans, a lot of people have already said they've already kind of made their peace with it. Got to make a change. I'm tired of him. Got to see somebody else. My question is always, as it is every week we talk about this, who you going to get? And the other thing is, what if he does close out? What if they close out? They're 8-4 with a third-string quarterback. Everything I've said, kind of hard to make a move there. But I get the impression a lot of people are just done with it. They care, but they don't care what happens because our traffic has been really down after 2 wins. Even like on Twitter, I went back and found the Georgia Tech game, and there were a couple big Georgia Tech plays where there's like 20 responses on Twitter. Then you go look at the Florida State game, and Omarion has the 49-yard shovel pass and run for a touchdown. There's no comments.
I know.
It's wild. It's like a lot of people are rooting for him to lose, which I find to be absolutely amazing. Because I could assure you that if the brass feels a change needs to be made, they will make a change. Bubba would facilitate a change if he thinks one should be made, regardless of what Twitter says. You can cheer for your team and cheer for the kids. And if Bubba thinks a change needs to be made, he's going to make a change.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt.
It may not sound publicly like he's making a change because they would be respectful, but trust me, there's ammunition, or not ammunition, I should say, there's piles of evidence in that building to suggest a change might be necessary.
Yeah.
And there's also enough evidence in the other building to suggest change isn't necessary. It's wild.
Yeah. No, I think I've said it before. I think a lot of people, I remember tweeting it after the game, really, but I think a lot of fans checked out and made up their minds, and they're not going to change their mind after the Duke game. I think that was the end for a lot of people. I at the time, I get it, but why people aren't, certain fans, maybe again, it's not the whole fan base, but why certain fans are just like kind of, you're not even, caring when they win is a little bit weird to me, because you're a fan, you care about the team and the program. So why are you not allowed to get excited anymore when they win? I understand maybe people don't want Mack long term, and I understand the reasons for that. And we don't need to sit here and harp on that. We've talked about it at length for years now and seasons now, but I don't really understand the phenomena of why, when Carolina's winning and has 2 good wins over the last couple of weeks, and why people don't care. I do think some of it, we were talking about this off camera a little bit, I do think some of it is maybe the opposition. Virginia sucks. I'm sorry, but they do. Florida State's a train wreck, the biggest train wreck in college football. And I understand that, but I think the reasons you can be positive and should be positive about it, it's not the fact that Carolina won those games, it's how they won those games. It's the performance of the defensive line. It's the performance of Jacobe Criswell. It's Omarion Hampton rushing for 105 yards against Virginia, 172, 200 plus all-purpose yards, 250 plus all-purpose yards against Florida State. There's a lot of reasons you can be excited about maybe what Carolina was able to do over the last couple weeks, while also being able to put the opponent to one side as well, because it's not that they've won, it's also how they've gone about doing it. So yeah, I find it a little bit fascinating. I don't really get it, but again, I always go back to that Duke game, and I'll continue to kind of double down on it. I think a lot of people just made their mind up after that. And again, I can get it, but I don't necessarily agree with it maybe.
I'll say it again. I think both sides can pile up enough stuff to make a decent case.
Yeah.
To support their position. And the reason I say that about the people who want Mack out is just because I think the age does play a factor there. Other schools recruiting against him plays a factor there, and I think that has to be weighed in as well. But I'm going to go back to this whole point. if they went out and they win 8, and let's say they win a bowl game, win 9, but if they went out and win 8, you've got 9, 8, and 8 in the last 3 years. I've said this on these shows before, and I'll say it again. In 2017 and 18, Larry's last 2 years, I wish I had a $10 bill for every person who said, I just want to win 8 or 9 and beat State.
I remember it. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what, if they went out and beat State, that's exactly what Mack's doing. Mm-hmm. What Mack said when he came, he was going to win a national title. The landscape is very different now than it was 2019.
Yeah.
2018, that press conference. Very different. No one knew NIL was coming, certainly in the form that it's become. And the transfer portal wasn't yet a thing. Let's remember, he was recruiting really well. And now things have changed. I do think there will be more money for the program. I think NIL money, it's already considered third tier for NIL money, which is not bad because there's only a handful of schools in the 1 tier. There's only a decent number in the 2 tier. They're in a 3rd tier with a lot of programs that would surprise you. And I think that they're prepared to do pretty well in the portal this coming off season.
Agree.
And I do think that this staff has learned a lot about how to use the portal and how not to use it. Mm-hmm. So those are important factors. But is the school getting a return on its investment? They are spending money on football. I know that. In fact, I'll probably know a lot more about that soon because I'm going to look into a little bit more of it, some more specifics. But Mack wants a lot of stuff. He gets a lot of it, but he doesn't get all of it because he's not at Texas right now. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So he's got to deal with what he's got to work with. But at the same time, I think the commitment from UNC, that communication, that line of communication is ongoing. And I think that there is an open-mindedness on the UNC part to invest more into football and to continue investing. It's increased considerably under Mack, but it's still not what he wants. It's still not what it should be for North Carolina to be in the same boat with Clemson and Miami and Florida State. But I do think the program is inching in that direction. The next guy would have a lot of the same issues Mack has, but he wouldn't have the standing that Mack has on that campus. He wouldn't have the negotiation tactics that Mack has. He would be someone that would have to earn that respect and trust over time before he even tries to barter to get anything. And so you're talking 2028? And the effect of it would be 2029. That's why you should be very cautious about pulling a trigger when you don't know what else is there. That's the way I look at it. Now, I understand why some people want to. I know that those closes, I can only imagine how bad it was for fans because as a guy covering the team, it's like, I got to write this story again.
Yeah, same old kind of thing.
Yeah. And so I like different stories just because I like anybody in the work. You don't want the person who, if you work at Home Depot, you don't want to have to cut the same piece of wood every time somebody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe that's a terrible analogy, but
no, you're right. I get it. I know what you're saying.
I think that let's just let it play out. I know that people say it's a cop out and I'm being political. I'm really not. Let it play out. They end up 8-4 and they close out with all the things that they've dealt with this year. It would be very, very difficult to get behind any decision to move on from Mack, in my opinion. He will have proven yet again that why he's a Hall of Famer. Because this is a difficult set of circumstances to overcome. And I think so far right now, it's safe to say they may have done that. Because going back to what you said at the beginning, I think they have fully cut the cord to JMU. I thought the residue and the stench of JMU hung around probably until they went and won at Tallahassee, because they won at UVA and everybody's like, great, but Carolina football classic for them, they're going to go in Tallahassee and get beat. They went down there and took care of business. When that game ended, I thought, okay, the JMU residue is gone. It's over. The stench does not exist anymore.
Yeah, and none of it, again, we said it after the Virginia game, none of it really matters. I mean, the Florida State performance is good and all, but it doesn't really matter if Carolina goes and loses to Wake at home because that's a game they should be winning. So it is something that it's going to have to play out week by week, and things can change if Carolina goes to, loses at home to Wake or maybe goes up to BC and doesn't play well. Then I think it's right to have, okay, maybe this team hasn't turned a corner as much as we thought they were, or maybe as good as we think they can potentially be now down the stretch, because they're 3 very winnable games. So, yeah, we're going to have to see how things continue to play out. But I still think Carolina fans should at least get excited and be happy that their team's winning. And I think a lot of fans are, but there is a section that it maybe just doesn't.
I'm curious. I'm curious about this. I want to ask people that are watching and let us know what you think it is. If you have not made your mind up yet about the future of the program, who leads it, do you have a set final record in mind? That's the line in the sand. Okay, he's got to win at least 7. So that means he got to finish 2-1, at least 7, and you'll be okay with him coming back one more time. Or does he have to win out? Or does it matter? Not matter at all. I'm curious to know what people think. If he wins one more, they're bowl eligible. Is that enough for you?
Yeah.
I'm very curious. I'll ask you that question too, but I want to make everybody that watches us on Facebook, that catches our stuff on Twitter at Heel Illustrated and on our sites. I want to know if you believe that there's still a chance he comes back based on what happens these last 3 games, what the final record needs to be. Now, if you've already made up your mind and it doesn't matter what happens, tell us that too. I'm very curious to know what the people who watch us and listening to us, what they're saying.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be fascinating to know because I think you get a wide variety of responses. I really do.
What would you say for you?
It's tough, man, because we talked about all the things that Carolina's having to deal with this year. You talk about the fact that Carolina's starting a 3rd-string quarterback who was never even thought he was going to play here at Carolina in the first place. And, he actually looks pretty dang good, too. We'll talk about him in a second, a little bit further. But you're also looking at a defense that looks a lot better with a guy like K'Mon Rucker coming back. So based on what I've seen the last 2 weeks, this is what I expect. This is the standard from Carolina. I don't care about the opponents. We've seen better overall performances on both sides of the ball from position groups that we were very critical of at times earlier this year. If that can continue when Carolina finishes 8-4, I think that's a heck of a season. Now, if Carolina goes and loses to Wake at home and then maybe struggles against BC, I look at it like this, AJ. If Carolina finishes 6-6, I don't know if that's good enough because that means you're going to have lost a game in my opinion, you shouldn't lose based on what we've seen the last couple of weeks. You're going to have to have one of those stinky performances come back in the fold again. Should that maybe be a surprise when you look at what Carolina's had to deal with and maybe who's out there? Maybe not, but I am judging Carolina now on what happened the last couple of weeks. I'm judging them on
scenario. 7-5, lose at BC. Versus 7-5, lose at home to State. I think those are 2 different 7-5s.
Me too.
I think 7-5, losing at BC in what could be horrible weather against Thomas Castellanos, but beating State at home, I think that is a lot more palatable than 7-5, beating Wake and winning at BC and losing to State at home for
I agree with that.
Straight year.
You can't lose.
I think if it's purely, let's say for the sake of discussion, no decisions have been made at all. Bubba Cunningham is saying, guys, I'm going to let this thing play out and then think about it. I think 7-5 with a loss at home to State makes it very, very difficult for Bubba.
Yeah.
I think 7-5 with a loss at BC, but a win over State makes it less difficult. I think 8-4 makes it either a no-brainer or extremely challenging if he is indeed already made up his mind he wants to make a change. And that actually hurts his ability to do that because I think it would be very difficult justifying moving on from a coach like Mack Brown if he goes 8-4, winning his last 5 with a 3rd-string quarterback. Especially, it would be a very, very hard sell.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with that. I think you can't lose to State this year. And even AJ too, I think if you finish 7-5 and you lose to a team like State, and you go lose the bowl game again, then I think it's like, okay, Carolina, what is Mack's record right now in bowl games? Was it 1-3, 1-4 is his time back at Carolina?
1-4.
1-4. You make that 1-5 and it's like, okay, like why? And I don't care about, I get the opt-outs. Everybody has opt-outs. So you have to kind of manage it on that. But you go lose to State and then you lose a bowl game again. I think the conversation is even more, it's going to get ramped up even more from fans of like, all right, man, this just ain't working like we thought it would. And I get it, but
don't you think a change would be, if a change is made, don't you think a change is made before the bowl game? Because you got to be able to keep your recruiting class.
Yeah, you would think so.
And even if Mack decides to leave, don't you think Mack would announce so they can get a head coach to keep them, or maybe he announces afterward, but kids still be allowed to leave their letters. I think that the timing would be very interesting, and we're obviously just supposing here for the sake of discussion. But if let's say Mack says, you know what, I went out, screw them. I've given them really what they wanted, and I'm tired of the crap. People don't appreciate it. You could stop Florida State on 5 straight 3-and-outs, whatever, and they hit on a big 60-yard pass play, and people are just, torching and burning the village.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe he's like, I don't need that anymore.
I wouldn't blame him.
Sally and I have a ton of money. Let's go enjoy it.
I'd be, if I was Mack, I'd be chilling up in the North Carolina mountains in my mountain house. Right now, that's what I'd be doing. I wouldn't be coaching college football.
But he loves it. It's who he is.
Yeah, he loves it. He loves it. Yeah.
He needs a team and all that, and he's an asset in these kids' lives. Trust me, he really is. Families swear by him. So I would think that this bowl game won't affect any decisions. I think everything would be known before that.
I agree. I think if I'll answer it like this: if Carolina finishes 8-4, I think he deserves another season. Especially you look at a guy like Bryce Baker coming in. I want to see what he can do with a guy like that. You also have a big threat of losing him if Mack leaves. If Mack was to leave this offseason, I think there's a legitimate chance that maybe he doesn't come to North Carolina. I'm not saying I have any insider information on whether that's going to happen or not. I just think it obviously becomes a lot more of a possibility he decides not to come to Carolina.
Jacob, it does, but I think right now, you never take a player over a coach.
Yeah, for sure.
Number one. Number two, because of the way Jacobe Criswell has improved, even if there's a coaching change, he probably sticks around.
Yeah, for sure.
So at least you have someone who's improving and is solid at minimum moving forward. So maybe Bryce Baker isn't starting quarterback the minute he steps on field, like I've said before. I think he would be, because Jacoby's making that kind of progress. So that would give the new coach a year to go find his quarterback, that kind of thing. So
it's a good point.
I would say that whatever is going to happen, if this is Mack's last year, we'll know within several days after the NC State game, one way or the other.
Yeah. I think if Carolina finishes 8-4, he definitely deserves another season with everything they've gone through. Third-string quarterback, losing Tylee Kraft. I think the job he would have done would have been really, really impressive, despite maybe the competition not being great down the stretch. Still, they won those games. 7-5, I think, especially if you lose to State, it becomes a lot harder, like you've mentioned, for maybe a guy like Bubba, who we've talked about previously before. Maybe his stance on the program right now maybe becomes a little bit tougher of a decision for him to make. And again, if they finish 6-6, then that means you're having to have lost, 2 of the last 3. Then I think I would maybe lean towards, maybe it might be worth trying something new. And I think the vast majority of the Carolina fan base, if Carolina finishes 6-6, is going to feel the exact same way, because you can't ignore. You won't be able to ignore the early season losses and the way in which they did it, but you're also not going to be able to kind of just overlook the fact that they're going to have to lose 2 out of 3 games to very winnable opponents. What'd you say?
Do you think what percentage of the fan base do you think is done and wants a change because they think a change needs to be made for the sake of change?
I think,
or for what they say are valid reasons. What percentage of fan base believes they have valid reasons to want to change?
I think it's a big portion of it. I don't know if I'm struggling if it's a majority or not, because it's so hard to judge that. You know what I mean? Because
the squeakiest wheel, they say the squeakiest wheel gets the most oil, but the squeakiest wheel is the one little wheel that's the loudest.
Not everybody's on Twitter. Not everybody's on message boards. Everybody on Twitter message boards.
People who are sitting back and letting it play out are not going to run to Twitter. Come on, guys, we got to sit back and let it play out. No one's ever on the Twitter doing that. Usually they're fire and brimstone on Twitter about stuff like that. But I would say, based on our traffic, that's where I go. Like our readers and our listeners, I would say it's 35 to 40%.
I'd probably agree.
Of the very, very serious part of the fan base wants a change. That's the number. That's the number range I would throw out there.
Yeah, I get it. And I go back to that Duke game. I go back to the JMU game, and even the Georgia Tech game, the way in which they lost that one. It's just like kind of, we've seen this before. How do you give up that kind of run in that situation? But if you're judging the team on what they've done over the last couple of weeks, I think the last 2 performances and maybe the optimism going into the final 3 games with them being very winnable, I think maybe for your average fan who isn't who's kind of letting things play out, I think maybe their mindset is shifted towards, okay, maybe Mack deserves another season to see what he can do with maybe less adversity throughout a year. But again, I think these last 3 games are going to play a pivotal role in the fan base's perspective of how it plays out, because I don't think you can necessarily ignore 8-4. There will be people who will ignore 8-4, but I think if you look at it from a level-headed perspective, if Carolina is able to finish 8-4 with everything they've had to deal with, that's a pretty damn impressive. It's not what people want to see, and it shouldn't be the end goal based on what Mack's state admissions have been coming back. I know NIL's changed it, make it a lot harder. You can't ignore that. A lot of people do, but you can't ignore it, especially at Carolina, like we've talked about. But if Carolina's able to finish this thing 8-4 out, I think a lot of your more level-headed average fans are going to be a lot more willing to say, you know what, give Mack another year. Let's see how things play out. And if things go wrong again next year, then yeah, it's time for a reset. And let's see if we can get some things rolling somewhere else. But again, too, if you get rid of Mack, I don't think the solution is that I don't think there's no easy solution if you get rid of Mack.
If you force him out, the next guy, the prospective candidates are going to call him and say, so what do you say about this job? Well, I'm a Hall of Famer. I'm the best coach they've ever had. And I've given them exactly what they wanted, and they just ran my butt out.
Yeah.
I wouldn't touch this job with a 100-foot pole.
Now, if someone said you can go out and get someone like, Cignetti at Indiana, I'd say, you know what, if you can get him this offseason, go get him. Is that going to happen?
Is North Carolina going to pay its head football coach $9 or $10 million a year?
No, it's not going to happen. But
and
if someone was to
staff
say that, I'd do
and
it.
give look, Mack tried to get $50,000 raises for the offensive coaches for being first in the ACC in 7 offensive categories. And got pushback. Chris Cignetti isn't going to come in and get a lot more money for assistant coaches or anything like that. That's not going to work. So that's what people have to consider as well. And if they do finish 8-4, that means they're 4-1 on the road.
For you.
With the one loss by 1 point in a game that led 20-0 midway through the third quarter. It's not my decision to make, although maybe I will write a column at some point saying this is what I think needs to happen, because that is my responsibility at some point.
Yeah.
When I feel like I'm there, I'm just not there yet.
Yeah, Jace, Gabe, we'll have to see how things play out. I think it is a fascinating conversation. But before we head out of here, I want to talk about one more thing. I want to end it more on maybe a positive note in a lot of ways, because I think there are some positives surrounding this team for sure, especially over the last couple of games. And I think it's Jacobe Criswell's journey, man. And we haven't really maybe spent a ton of time talking about him specifically in a football show, but I think he's more than earned it with what he's been able to do this season. And I think the Florida State game, AJ, really illustrated that for me. You look at the train wreck at quarterback Florida State has, a team coming off what they came off last year. They don't have a clue at quarterback. Nothing they do works. Their offense is horrendous. And then on the other side of the ball, you're seeing Jacobe Criswell, who I think really since he took over against NC Central has looked really positive and really good in a majority of games that he's played. And I think over the last couple of weeks especially, I've been very impressed with him. And there was multiple times during the Florida State game, and even going back to the Virginia game, going back further than that, where I watch what he's doing, and the fact that he's a third-string quarterback. I sit there, what would have been the third-string quarterback this year if things played out like maybe, let's just say Max Johnson stays healthy. Some of the throws he makes, some of the plays he makes, there's multiple times a game where I'm like, man, that was really good. He doesn't really miss guys. His deep ball's getting a little bit better. He's hitting guys, when he's rolling out of the pocket. He's had some good games. I think the O-line has improved, but he's had some good games, playing behind an O-line that has struggled at times this year for reasons that we've discussed before. But I just think he's a guy that deserves some recognition, because the fact that a third-string quarterback has come into the situation he's came into, playing pretty much no college football, especially starting, in his few years in college, going back years now. I think what he's been able to do this year, man, has been really impressive. And I think he's had I know maybe the stats don't necessarily show it, especially at the Florida State game, only 211 passing yards. But I think over the last couple of weeks in particular, AJ, I think he's been really, really positive, and I really like the player he's become. I mean, he's a good quarterback, man. I think it's okay to say that. He's had some really good games this season for North Carolina, and I think the positive for him is he's continuing to get better. And as he's getting better, the offense is getting better, and the team is starting to win some games. So, yeah, man, I think he deserves a little bit of love and a little bit of credit. He's been good this season.
13-17 at FSU. Mm-hmm. Only threw twice in the second half. He was cool with that. I asked him about it.
Didn't need to.
We want to win.
Yeah.
We don't need to throw. We got this train back here. Give it to him.
Yeah.
He was 16 for his last 21 at UVA. So since he started 3-9 at UVA, he's 29 for 38.
Good man.
And 211 yards on 13 completions, pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now the long ball he still overthrows. He's still way off on it. That when that comes, he changes everything for him. But he's hitting passes on the run more when he's moving, he's rolling. He's making much better decisions on when not to throw. He doesn't have a lot of throwaways. Mm-hmm. He'll tuck it in and run. He'll pick up 2 yards instead of throwing the ball away. The drops have gone down. So the teammates, the receivers were really frustrated in September, really frustrated. And it showed because there were drops. But the drops are not as frequent as they were because there's a lot more confidence in him. I think the focus is better. I think the chemistry is better with the receivers. He had a couple balls to Jacobe Criswell the other day, hit him in stride over the middle. Had another one to McCollum. He was not hitting those consistently before. He's able to spread the ball around the field more than he was when he first came up. He's not chucking it as much. He's passing it more. And I think the respect that the teammates have of him is significantly higher. The chemistry with the offensive line, I think the line blocks for him now, pass pro or whatever, they understand who he is as a player, which is very different than Connor is, which is very different than Max was. So that's all part of it too. And I think Chip Lindsey's all more on the same page with him now. I asked Chip and Jacobe last week, I think I may have asked Mack too, about what the communication is like when he comes to the sideline. Because in Chip's world, he was working with Max for a long time. And a little bit with Connor. Suddenly he's working with Connor. And then all of a sudden Connor struggled so much they got to go to Jacobe. Well, we told you weren't going to play until the spring, but sorry, we need you out there while overweight. And he's had to lose weight since he started playing. And it takes a while for that communication to get to a point where it needs to be, and it's there now. Chip now knows what to call because he understands Jacobe's game. So the offense is in I don't know what it is right now. I haven't looked at the rankings this week, but I think they're around top 25, top 28 nationally in total offense. That's pretty good. They had 500 yards. They've had more than 400 yards in all of Jacobe's starts. And throw away the JMU one, the rest against the Power Fives, they're averaging about 445 yards a game, which would put them in the top 30 or so nationally. That's pretty good. So it's not like they're not moving the ball. It's not like they're not scoring points. The question on this team still goes to the other side of the ball and the offensive line protecting him, but the sacks aren't there as much now because he knows how to get away from the sack, and he has not thrown an interception since the Duke game. He's gone 123 passes since throwing an interception. There's a lot to like about him, and with what they have left on the schedule, going back to what we were talking about earlier, he's a quarterback you can win these next 3 games with. He's elevated himself to that point.
Yeah. No, I agree, man. I think his play this season, his story really, I think has been one of the biggest positives, one of the coolest things to kind of cover from a journalistic perspective. So if he keeps playing like he is, if he, like you said, perfect that deep ball a little bit, get a little more accurate with that, he's only going to go up levels. But again, I just go back to there are multiple moments, really going back to the Central game. I remember it then, but there are just moments in every game where I kind of say, "Ooh, that was good. I like that. That was impressive." And I don't know if maybe another guy's starting, if we're having those conversations, and maybe the team's in the position it's in now. So what he's been able to do coming into this situation late too, like he has, and becoming the player that he's become, I think it's one of the coolest and feel good stories of the season. And again, I know a lot of Carolina fans aren't positive about things, but good Lord, be positive about that. I don't think there's any reason.
And let me tell you this, and I can't go too far into this right now because I'm not at liberty to just yet. We'll get clearance at some point. You know some of the things I'm going to talk about here. His personal story is incredible.
Fantastic. It's unbelievable.
You talk about a feel-good story. Maybe now's a good time. It depends on how comfortable he is with it, but it's an incredible personal story. It's something that I think most fans have no idea about. And when they find out, they're going to have unbelievable admiration. I admire him.
Me too. Yeah.
I'm more than twice his age. I admire him. I admire him for how he stepped up, and immediately when things didn't go well, he put them on himself. He didn't make excuses. Well, I'm going to bring a quarterback in front. Look, I need to make that play. I need to gain the trust of my teammates. He's a very smart guy. He's a stand-up guy. He's accountable. And his life story is something that will, when people find out, he will be a fan favorite overnight.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you think about what he's endured and what he's had to deal with in life and be where he is right now, it is an incredible story. There are some tear-jerking aspects to this football team, and if you peel away the layers on Jacobe Criswell's life, it could bring you to that point.
Yeah. No, man. It's inspirational.
I admire the guy.
Yeah.
I admire him a lot. And it would be cool to see them win because he would be the quarterback of all that. He's a guy who I think he got to a point where he thought, I'm just never going to play. Mm-hmm. He'd be a guy that goes on and coaches in high school or something like that. Hey, this guy played at North Carolina and Arkansas. How many passes did he throw? Like 30. Never really played. Now he's a starting quarterback and could be a starting quarterback for 2 seasons.
Yeah, he definitely could be, man. Speaks to it, man. I mean, this story will come out eventually, and it's one that I think a lot of Carolina fans will have a newfound respect for him and what he's been able to overcome and come through, and also a guy very strong in his faith too, which I think
Mack
is impressive. Yeah,
and in Mack, there's the reasons he came back. Mm-hmm. When you come back and say, "I just want to come home," and the reasons why, I think that there are Mack doesn't shy away from saying the off the field reasons why the program's strong, and Jacobe Criswell is a classic example of the strength of the program off the field. Yeah. And program is now benefiting on the field because of that aspect of it off the field with him.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. And that story is, I hope it comes out sooner rather than later. I don't really know who's going to put it out or who may put it out. I don't think it really matters, but
I'll put it out when it's time, but I'm not going to do it I'm not going to do it until we get clearance to do it.
Yeah, it's not our right to do that.
And I've probably said too much already, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And
so if I have Jeremy, just send me a text and say too much.
He will, man. No, it's a fantastic one. In due time, it'll come out, and when it does, definitely take the time to read it and learn about it, because it's definitely inspiring. But yeah, I just wanted to end on that note. We'll obviously come back next week ahead of the Wake game and talk a little bit more X's and O's. Yeah, what Carolina's going to have to do to beat Wake, and we'll obviously talk a little bit more about this team's chances going into it and maybe what they can do the rest of the season. But I think that's enough for now. I wanted to go a little bit shorter. I think we've done that. I don't know necessarily how long this one is, but I think we have done that. So kudos to us for actually not going an hour on the show when we say we're going to go 30 minutes. And yeah,
we're around 30 minutes.
But I think we're around there, which is impressive for us. I'm actually pretty proud of us, AJ. It's good stuff from us.
So cut my mic off.
Yeah, we better stop talking before we go off on a tangent.
If I start talking again, we'll go to like 47 minutes.
Yeah, we got to stop. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another quick edition of the UNC Football Show. I say quick for us, I should say. Edition of the Carolina Football Show. We appreciate you guys watching as always. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Hit the notification bell, too. Keep it locked to TarLillustrated.com for all your coverage of football, basketball, and recruiting. You can be a Carolina Insider, too, for just $8.33 a month. If you don't want to do that, we'd rather you do it because you get a lot of perks for doing it. You can shoot us a Venmo at TarLillustrated. That's just an easy way to say thanks and support what we do. It all goes back into the business, travel, paying staff, all that kind of stuff that comes along with running this thing. So if you want to do that, we'd greatly appreciate it. But regardless, we appreciate you guys watching as you always do. And, we'll see y'all next time. Thanks.
Thanks.